The dust kicked up by Samuel Hart's wagon wheels settled like a shroud over the familiar road that led to what used to be home. 20 years had passed since he'd ridden away from Clearwater Valley, his heart heavy with shame and his pockets empty of everything but regret. Now at 42, his weathered hands gripped the reins of a team of horses that pulled not just his worldly possessions, but the weight of 2 decades spent trying to forget the woman he'd left behind. The letter in his vest pocket crinkled. As he shifted on the wagon seat, his brother's handwriting had been shaky when he wrote it. "Pa's gone, Sam. The ranch is yours now, if you want it." But things have changed here. He walked over to where they sat and extended his hand to Samuel. "I'm releasing you from our agreement, Hart. Keep your ranch, keep your easement, keep whatever makes you happy. All I ask is that you take care of her better than I did." Samuel stood and shook Henderson's hand, seeing the genuine pain and dignity in the other man's eyes. "Robert, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. I should have done it 20 years ago." Henderson turned to Eliza one last time. "I'll have my attorney draw up divorce papers. You can have the house, half of everything. I'll move back east, start over somewhere nobody knows me as the man who couldn't hold on to his wife's heart. Robert, please don't leave because of this. This is your home too." Henderson smiled sadly. "No, Eliza, this was never my home. It was just a place where I tried to build a life with someone who belonged somewhere else." With someone else, put his hat back on and walked to the door. "Hart, if you hurt her, I'll come back and kill you myself." "You won't have to," Samuel replied. "I've already hurt her enough for one lifetime." Samuel and Eliza sat in the quiet schoolhouse as the afternoon sun slanted lower through the windows. Finally, she spoke. "Is this really happening? After all these years, are we really getting a second chance?" Samuel lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her fingers gently. "If you want it, if you think you can forgive me for all the years we lost, only if you can forgive me for not waiting. There's nothing to forgive. You made the best choice you could with the information you had. Now, I'm the one who failed us both by leaving in the first place." Eliza stood and walked to the blackboard, where children's lessons still showed faintly through the chalk dust. "What happens now? We just ride off into the sunset, like in the storybooks?" Samuel laughed, the sound rich and warm in the empty classroom. "Well, first I suppose I should officially court you. Properly this time. Flowers, dinners, long walks in the moonlight. All the things I should have done 20 years ago instead of assuming I knew what was best for both of us. And then, if you'll have me, I'd like to marry you. In the church where your parents were married, with the whole town watching, I want everyone to know that Eliza Henderson is choosing to become Eliza Hart, and that this time, I'm never letting you go." She turned from the blackboard, her eyes shining with tears and something that looked like hope. "Samuel Hart, are you proposing to me in a schoolhouse? I'm proposing to you everywhere and anywhere you'll listen. In schoolhouses and at toll booths and under the stars. I'm proposing to you every day for the rest of our lives until you finally say yes." "Yes," she whispered. "Yes. Yes, you beautiful, stubborn, impossible man. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll take that second chance. Yes, I choose love over safety, passion over contentment, dreams over resignation. Yes to all of it." Samuel crossed the room in 3 quick strides and swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she laughed, the first truly joyous sound he'd heard from her since his return. When he set her down, they were both breathless and grinning like teenagers. "I love you, Eliza. I never stopped loving you, not for a single day in 20 years. I love you too. And this time, Samuel Hart, if you even think about leaving me, for my own good, I'll shoot you myself." He kissed her then, there in the dusty schoolhouse, with the afternoon sun painting everything golden. And it felt like coming home after the longest journey imaginable. Chapter 6, New Beginnings, The Wedding, was held on a crisp October morning when the aspens had turned to gold and the air smelled of wood smoke and possibility. True to Samuel's word, it took place in the little church where Eliza's parents had married 30 years before. With half the county in attendance, Robert Henderson had left for Boston the week after the divorce was finalized. But he'd sent a wedding gift, the deed to the road, through Clearwater Heights, along with a note that simply read, "For safe passage home." Samuel had torn down his toll station the day before the wedding, but not before collecting one final payment from Dr. Williams, who grumbled good-naturedly as he handed over his $5. "Suppose you'll be wanting your money back now that you're joining the community," the doctor said. "Not on your life," Samuel grinned. "That money's going toward the honeymoon." Now, as Samuel watched his bride walk down the aisle in a dress of ivory silk that brought out the green in her eyes, he felt the last of his old regrets fall away. She was radiant, confident, every inch the woman he'd fallen in love with all those years ago, but with an added depth. That only comes from surviving heartbreak and finding the courage to love again. Sheriff Morrison performed the ceremony, his weathered face beaming as he pronounced them husband and wife. When Samuel kissed his bride, the congregation erupted in cheers and applause that could be heard all the way to the Old Hart Ranch. The reception was held in the town square, the tables groaning under the weight of food contributed by neighbors, who'd gone from viewing Samuel as a troublemaker to embracing him as one of their own. Mrs. Patterson, the banker's wife, had even volunteered to make the wedding cake a towering confection. It's decorated with sugar roses that matched Eliza's bouquet. As the evening wore on and the dancing began, Samuel found himself standing with Tom Morrison at the edge of the festivities, watching his wife laugh with the other women as they planned some sort of community improvement project. "You did good, Sam," the sheriff said, raising his glass. "Took the long way around, but you got there in the end." "Sometimes the long way is the only way that teaches you what you really need to know," Samuel replied. "And what's that?" Samuel watched Eliza spin in the arms of Dr. Williams, her skirts swirling around her ankles, joy radiating from every line of her body. That love isn't about protecting someone from life's struggles. It's about facing those struggles together and coming out stronger on the other side. "Think you'll be happy here? After all those years in the big city?" Samuel looked around at the faces of his neighbor's people who'd once viewed him with suspicion and hostility, but who now raised their glasses in celebration of his happiness. "I think happiness isn't about where you are, Tom. It's about who you're with." Later, as the party wound down and the newlyweds prepared to head home to the ranch house Samuel had spent the past month renovating, Elisa pulled him aside. "I have something for you," she said, reaching into her reticule and pulling out a folded piece of paper. "I've been carrying this for 20 years, waiting for the right moment to give it to you." Samuel unfolded the paper and felt his breath. Catch it was a letter in Eliza's careful handwriting, dated just 2 days after he'd left Clearwater Valley. "My dearest Samuel," it began, "I know you think you're doing the right thing by leaving, but you're wrong. Love isn't about money or security or what other people think is proper. Love is about choosing to face whatever comes together, hand in hand, heart to heart. I would rather be poor with you than rich without you. I would rather struggle by your side than live in comfort with anyone else. If you truly love me as you claim, you'll come back and fight for us. You'll choose hope over fear, faith over doubt, love over everything else that seems more practical but matters so much less." Samuel's hands were shaking as he finished reading. "You wrote this 20 years ago, the day after you left. I rode out to the ranch, but you were already gone. Your father said you'd headed for California. I thought about following you, but ... double quotes." She shrugged. "I was 22 and scared and too proud to chase after a man who'd already made it clear he didn't want me enough to stay. I never got this letter, I know. Kept it all these years, telling myself that someday I'd have the chance to give it to you. That someday you'd come back and I could show you what you'd thrown away." Samuel folded the letter carefully and tucked it into his vest pocket, right next to his heart. "Elisa, for all of it, for leaving, for staying away so long, for being too much of a coward to fight for what mattered most." She reached up and touched his face, her thumb tracing the scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw souvenir from a bar fight in Denver 10 years earlier. "We were both cowards, in our own ways. I was too scared to fight for you, and you were too scared to let me. But we're not those people anymore." "No," Samuel agreed, covering her hand with his own. "We're not. As they walked home through the quiet streets of Clearwater Heights, past the neat houses and manicured gardens that had once seemed like symbols of everything he couldn't provide, Samuel realized that he'd been wrong about more than just leaving. He'd been wrong about what constituted a good life, about what really mattered, about the difference between existing and truly living. The old Hart Ranch looked different in the moonlight, not like a relic of the past, but like a promise of the future. Samuel had modernized the house while keeping its rustic charm, adding electric lights and indoor plumbing while preserving the wide front porch where his grandparents had sat in the evenings, watching the sun set over the mountains. "It's beautiful," Elisa said, as they climbed the front steps. "Feels like home." "It is home," Samuel replied, lifting her in his arms to carry her across the threshold. "For both of us, finally." Later, as they lay in bed listening to the night sounds of the valley, the distant call of an owl, the whisper of wind through the aspens, the gentle lowing of cattle in the far pasture, Eliza spoke into the darkness. "You think we'll be happy? Really happy? Or will we always wonder what might have been if we'd made different choices?" Samuel pulled her closer, feeling the steady rhythm of her breathing against his chest. "I think happiness isn't about the absence of regret, love. I think it's about choosing to build something beautiful with the time we have left, regardless of the time we've lost. And what are we going to build?" Samuel smiled in the darkness, his mind already full of plans and dreams they could pursue together. Everything. A family, if we're blessed with children, a legacy that goes beyond land and money. A love story that proves it's never too late for second chances. "A love story," Eliza murmured sleepily. "I like the sound of that." As his wife drifted off to sleep in his arms, Samuel lay awake for a while longer, thinking about the long road that had brought them back to each other. 20 years of separation, heartbreak, and regret. 20 years of building walls instead of bridges, of choosing fear over faith, settling for less than what their hearts truly wanted. But those years hadn't been wasted, he realized. They'd been necessary. The young man who'd left Clearwater Valley in shame and desperation wouldn't have been able to build the kind of life he could offer Eliza now. And the young woman who'd been devastated by his leaving wouldn't have had the strength and wisdom to choose love over security. If she hadn't learned the difference between the two, sometimes, Samuel thought, as sleep finally claimed him, the long way around is the only way that leads you home. Epilogue. Full circle, 5 years later. Samuel Hart stood on his front porch watching his 3-year-old daughter, Sarah, chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. She had her mother's green eyes and his stubborn streak, a combination that promised interesting times ahead. "Daddy, look," Sarah called out, cupping her small hands around a captured firefly. "I caught a star." "So you did, sweetheart. Now let it go so it can find its family." Sarah opened her hands and watched in delight as the firefly blinked away into the darkening sky. Then she ran back to the porch and climbed onto Samuel's lap, settling against his chest with the complete trust that only small children possess. "Tell me the story again," she demanded. "Which story is that? The one about the fence and the toll? Road and how you and Mama found each other again."
"Oh, yeah."
Samuel chuckled and smoothed his daughter's dark hair. It had become her favorite bedtime story, though he suspected she was still too young to understand most of it. "Well," he began, "once upon a time there was a foolish young man who thought he knew what was best for everyone, ... As he told the familiar tale, Samuel saw Eliza emerge from the house, carrying their infant son, Robert, named for the man whose grace and dignity had made their happiness possible. She settled into the chair beside them, and Samuel reached out to take her, freehand, marveling as he always did at the simple miracle of her presence in his life. "And they lived happily ever after," Sarah prompted, as he reached the end of the story. "They're still working on it," Samuel said, kissing the top of her head. "Every single day." In the distance, the lights of Clearwater Heights twinkled like earthbound stars, and Samuel could see neighbors moving about their evening routines. The community had thrived in the years since his return, growing from a collection of houses into a true town with a school, library, and even a small hospital, where Dr. Williams served as the chief physician. Samuel had become something of a local hero. Not for his toll road scheme, though that story was still told with great amusement at town gatherings, but for his business acumen and his generous spirit. He'd used his wealth to fund the school's expansion, bringing the railroad through Clearwater Heights, and to establish a scholarship fund for young people who wanted to pursue their dreams beyond the valley. But his greatest achievement, he knew, was sitting right here beside him, a family built on love, forgiveness, and the courage to believe in second chances. As the stars emerged overhead and Sarah's breathing grew slow and steady in his arms, Samuel thought about the letter he'd received that morning from Robert Henderson. Robert had remarried in Boston, a widow with 2 children who, by all accounts, adored him. His letter had been full of news about his new life and his successful law practice, but it had ended with a line that had brought tears to Samuel's eyes. "Thank you for giving me the courage to find real love instead of settling for the shadow of it." "What are you thinking about?" Eliza asked softly. "It's just how strange life is," Samuel replied. "The worst thing that ever happened to Emil, leaving you 20 years ago, to the best thing that ever happened to me, finding my way back." "To you? Maybe that's the point," Eliza said, shifting baby Robert to her other arm. "Maybe the worst things and the best things are sometimes the same things, just viewed from different angles." Samuel nodded, thinking about the truth of that. The heartbreak that had driven him away had also driven him to build the success that allowed him to return as a man who could provide everything Eliza deserved. The years of separation had taught them both what really mattered and what they were willing to fight for. "Daddy," Sarah mumbled sleepily, "will you tell me another story?" "Tomorrow night, sweetheart. Tonight it's time for all little girls to dream." He carried Sarah inside and tucked her into bed, then returned to the porch where Eliza was nursing their son and humming a lullaby their own mothers had once sung. The moon was rising over the mountains, painting the valley in silver light. Samuel felt the deep contentment that comes from being exactly where you belong. "Any regrets?" Lisa asked, the question she posed sometimes in quiet moments like this. Samuel considered it seriously, as he always did. 20 years of separation, the children they might have had together if he'd stayed, the simple moments of daily life they'd missed sharing, the easier path they might have taken if he'd been braver at 22. "Only one," he said finally. "What's that?" Samuel leaned over and kissed his wife, tasting the sweetness of their life together in that simple gesture. "I regret that it took me so long to learn that the best way to protect the people you love isn't to walk away from them. It's to walk through whatever comes with them, hand in hand, no matter how difficult the path might be. And if you could go back and change things, make different choices." Samuel looked out over the valley that had shaped him, the land that had called him home, the lights of the community that had welcomed him back despite everything, he thought. About the toll road that had brought them together again, about Robert Henderson's grace in letting go, about the letter Eliza had carried for 20 years, waiting for the right moment to share it. "No," he said with certainty, "I wouldn't change a thing. Because every choice, every mistake, every moment of heartbreak led us exactly here, and here is perfect." Eliza smiled and leaned against his shoulder, and they sat in comfortable silence as the night settled around them like a blessing. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mate, and Samuel Hart's successful businessman, devoted husband, loving father, and former operator of the most expensive toll road in territorial history, closed his eyes and listened to the sound of his dreams finally coming true. In the end, he thought, love wasn't about taking the easy road or the safe road. It was about finding someone worth taking any road with, and then having the courage to walk it together no matter where it led. And sometimes, if you were very lucky and very patient and very determined, that road led you home. The Andersons bought up most of the valley. They've got plans. Samuel had folded that letter and carried it for 3 months before finally selling his successful freight business in San Francisco and heading home. Some wounds, he'd learned, never truly healed. They just waited. As his wagon crested the familiar hill overlooking Clearwater Valley, Samuel's breath caught in his throat. The landscape of his childhood had been carved up like a Sunday roast. Where once rolling pastures had stretched unbroken to the horizon, now a grid of neat streets, and painted houses sat like a checkerboard across the valley floor. Only one piece of the old world remained: the Hart family ranch, a stubborn island of weathered wood and memories in a sea of progress. But something was wrong. A tall wooden fence now blocked the old ranch road, and beside it stood a freshly painted sign: Clearwater Heights Homeowners Association, private property, no trespassing. Samuel climbed down from his wagon and approached the fence, running his fingers along the still green lumber. This wasn't just any barrier, it was a statement. Someone had deliberately cut off access to his family's land, the same road his grandfather had carved out of the wilderness 60 years ago. "You looking for someone?" The voice made him turn. A woman stood on the other side of the fence, her graying hair pinned up beneath a wide-brimmed hat. She wore a simple blue dress that had seen better days, but her posture spoke of quiet dignity. Their eyes met. Samuel felt the earth shift beneath his feet. Eliza? Her hand flew to her throat, and for a moment 20 years collapsed into nothing. She was still beautiful, though lines of worry now traced her face like the tributaries of a familiar river. Her green eyes, once bright with laughter and dreams, held a wariness that made his chest ache. "Samuel Hart." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I heard you might be coming back." They stood there, separated by more than just wooden boards and barbed wire. The silence stretched between them, heavy with all the words they'd never said, and all the years they'd spent apart. "Is this your fence, Eliza?" She shook her head, her eyes never leaving his face. "It belongs to the association, my husband." She paused, and Samuel noticed the way she touched the simple gold band on her finger. "Robert Henderson is the president. He had it built last month." Henderson. The name hit Samuel like a physical blow. Robert Henderson, the banker's son, Hood, courted Eliza with pretty words and promises of security, while Samuel had nothing to offer but a young man's dreams and empty pockets. "You married him?" It wasn't a question, but she nodded anyway. 2 months after you left?" The accusation in her voice was gentle but unmistakable. Samuel looked away, unable to meet her gaze. "Had nothing, Eliza. Less than nothing. My father was about to lose the ranch, and I was just another mouth to feed. Henderson could give you everything I couldn't. He'd give me everything except what I wanted most," she said softly. Before Samuel could respond, the sound of approaching horses made them both turn. A group of well-dressed men rode up the road, led by a tall figure on a bay stallion. Robert Henderson had aged well, his dark hair now silver at the temples, his bearing confident and prosperous. When he saw Samuel, his jaw tightened. "Hart." Henderson dismounted and walked to the fence, his hand resting casually on the pistol at his hip. "Heard you might be skulking around, Robert." Samuel's voice was steady, though his heart hammered against his ribs. "This fence is blocking access to my family's property." Henderson smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Your property?" "Far. As I know, taxes haven't been paid on the Hart place in over a year. County's been real patient, but patience has its limits. Taxes will be paid." "Will they?" Henderson pulled a folded paper from his coat. "Because according to this notice, you've got exactly 30 days before the county auction. And seeing as how this road crosses association property now, well, ... double quotes, he shrugged. Even if you somehow manage to keep the ranch, you'll need to find another way to reach it." Samuel studied the fence line, noting how it had been carefully positioned, to block not just the main road but every possible route to the ranch. It was a masterful trap, perfectly legal and utterly ruthless. "There is no other way," Samuel said. "Exactly." Henderson remounted his horse. "Eliza, I'll see you at home for dinner." He tipped his hat to her, but his eyes remained cold as winter. "Stone," when he looked at Samuel. "Hart, I suggest you save yourself some trouble and head back to wherever you came from. It's nothing for you here anymore." As Henderson and his men rode away, Samuel and Eliza stood in silence on opposite sides of the fence. Finally, she spoke. "He's not wrong, you know, about the taxes, and about there being nothing left for you here." Samuel looked at her, seeing past the lines that time had drawn on her face to the girl who used to meet him by the creek every evening, used to believe in dreams and second chances. "Maybe he's right about the taxes," Samuel said quietly, "but he's wrong about the rest." Chapter 2. The plan that night, Samuel made camp in his wagon beside the locked gate, studying the fence by firelight and thinking. The barrier stretched for nearly a mile in each direction, enclosing the entire Clearwater Heights development. But fences, Samuel had learned in his years as a freight hauler, were only as strong as the laws that backed them up. By morning, he had the beginnings of a plan. The Clearwater County Courthouse sat like a weathered granite monument in the center of town, its steps worn smooth by decades of boots and hard decisions. Samuel climbed those steps with a leather satchel full of documents and a head full of careful research. Mr. Hart. The county clerk, a thin man named Peterson, looked genuinely pleased to see him. Heard you were back in town.
Oh, worked with
Your father on the railroad right-of-way years ago? Good man, your PA. Thank you, Peterson. I need to research some property records. For 3 hours, Samuel pored over dusty ledgers and survey maps, tracing the boundaries of his family's original land grant. What he found made him smile for the first time since returning to Clearwater Valley when his grandfather had first claimed the land in 1825. The government had granted him not just the ranch property, but also an easement for ingress and egress along the old Indian Trail that connected the ranch to the main territorial road. That easement had never been officially abandoned. It had simply been forgotten as the years passed and the trail became a proper road. But forgotten wasn't the same as gone. Peterson, Samuel said, pointing to a faded line on the survey map. This easement here, it's still valid, isn't it? The clerk adjusted his spectacles and peered at the document. Well, I'll be damned. Excuse my language, Mr. Hart, but yes. It appears to be never been formally released or transferred. But what good does it do you now? That road runs right through the middle of the Henderson development. Samuel's smile grew wider. That's exactly the point. The next morning, Samuel set up a small table and chair directly in front of the association's gate. He placed a hand-painted sign beside the road, Private Toll Road, $5 per passage, Hart Transportation Company. He didn't have to wait long. Robert Henderson arrived at full gallop, his face red with rage. Behind him rode 3 other association members, including the doctor and the banker who'd replaced Henderson's father. What the hell do you think you're doing, Hart? Samuel stood slowly, tipping his hat politely. Exercising my legal rights, Henderson. This road crosses my family's easement, has for over 60 years. That's ridiculous. This is association property, Samuel pulled out a copy of the original survey and spread it on his table. This line here shows the boundaries of the Hart family easement. Your development was built right on top of it, but that doesn't invalidate my family's rights. Henderson leaned over to study the document, his face growing darker. Even if this is legitimate, you can't charge people to use a public road. It's not a public road anymore, Samuel said mildly. You made sure of that when you gated it off. Now it's a private road, crossing private property. And I'm entitled to charge a reasonable toll for its use. Dr. Williams, a portly man with mutton chop whiskers, sputtered in outrage. $5 is highway robbery? Samuel shrugged. Market rates. Same as you'd pay for a good hotel room or a week's wages for a working man. Of course, residents of the ranch, meaning me, travel free. This is extortion, Henderson growled. This is business, Samuel replied. Same as when you blocked my access to force me to sell. Only difference is, my methods are completely legal. As if summoned by the commotion, Eliza appeared at the fence. She wore a green dress that brought out her eyes, and Samuel felt that familiar tug in his chest. What's all this noise about? She asked. Henderson turned to his wife, his voice tight. With controlled anger, Hart here thinks he can charge us to use our own road. Not your road, Samuel said quietly, his eyes on Eliza. My easement. Your husband built his development right across it, which was his right. But it's still my family's easement, and I have every right to collect a toll for its use. Eliza looked from Samuel to the survey map on his table, her intelligent eyes, quickly grasping the situation. And if people don't pay, then they don't pass, Samuel said. Simple as that. Henderson's hand moved toward his gun, but Samuel's voice stopped him cold. I wouldn't, Robert. A lot of witnesses here, and Sheriff Morrison takes a dim view of threats against law-abiding citizens. Besides, I've got copies of all these documents filed with the county. Anything happens to me, my lawyer in San Francisco has instructions too. Pursue the matter on behalf of my estate. The standoff stretched for long moments, broken only by the sound of approaching horses. A group of association members rode up, clearly expecting to pass through the gate as usual. "What's the delay, Henderson?" called out the banker. Samuel stood and addressed the group. "Gentlemen, I'm afraid there's been a change in the toll structure for this road. $5 per passage payable in advance." The protests came fast and furious, but Samuel simply pointed to his sign and waited. After 20 minutes of heated argument, Dr. Williams finally threw a $5 gold piece on Samuel's table. "This is outrageous, but I have patience to see." Coynan opened the gate with a flourish. "Much obliged, Doctor. Y'all have a pleasant day." One by one, the other riders grudgingly paid their tolls. Henderson was the last to approach the table, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. "This won't work, Hart. I'll find a way to stop." "You," Samuel met his gaze steadily. "Maybe you will, but until then, that'll be $5. Henderson slammed the money down so hard, it bounced off the table. As he rode through the gate, he called back over his shoulder, "30 days, Hart. When the county takes your ranch for taxes, we'll see how smart you think you are." Samuel watched him go, then looked back at Eliza. She remained by the fence, studying him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "You always were too clever for your own good, Samuel Hart. Not clever enough, apparently. If I had been, I never would have left." She was quiet for a long moment. "You broke my heart," she said finally. "I know. I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't fix 20 years, Samuel." "No," he agreed. "But maybe it's a start." Chapter 3. Old Wounds. The toll road proved to be surprisingly profitable. Within a week, Samuel had collected over $200 from frustrated association members who had no choice but to pay or take a 20-mile detour around the development. He used the money to pay the back taxes on the ranch, walking into the county office with cash in hand and a satisfied smile on his face. But Henderson wasn't finished. On a humid Thursday morning, Samuel arrived at his toll station to find Sheriff Morrison waiting for him. Tom Morrison had been a friend of Samuel's father, a steady man with gray hair and a reputation for fairness. "Morning, Sam. Sheriff, problem?" Morrison shifted uncomfortably. "Got a complaint filed against you?" "Harassment, extortion, disturbing the peace. Judge wants to see you." Samuel nodded calmly. "I expected this. Henderson's not the type to give up easy, Sam." ... double quotes. Morrison lowered his voice. "I've known you since you were knee-high to a grasshopper, and I knew your PA well. But you're playing a dangerous game here. These association folks, they've got money and influence. Henderson's already talking to the territorial governor about having your easement revoked. Let him talk. The law, Tom. My family's. Rights don't disappear just because Henderson finds them inconvenient." The sheriff sighed. "Just be careful, son. Maybe think about making some kind of deal. This standoff isn't good for anybody." But Samuel wasn't interested in making deals. Not yet. He had 20 years of hurt and regret driving him forward. Watching Henderson's frustration grow gave him a satisfaction he hadn't felt in decades. The satisfaction didn't last long. That evening, as Samuel sat by his campfire reading a letter from his lawyer in San Francisco, he looked up to see Eliza riding toward him on a chestnut mare. Her hair loosed around her shoulders in the way he remembered from their youth. She dismounted and stood at the edge of his firelight, her face serious. "We need to talk," Samuel gestured to a log he'd arranged as a seat. "I'm listening." She sat down but kept her distance. "This has to stop, Samuel." "What has to stop?" "This war between you and Robert. It's tearing the community apart. People are choosing sides, and it's getting ugly." Samuel poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling into the night sky. "I'm not the one who started this war, Eliza. Your husband blocked my access and tried to force me off my family's land. I'm just defending myself by charging people $5 to use the road they live on." By exercising my legal rights? She was quiet for a moment, watching the flames dance. Do you remember what you told me the night before you left? Samuel's hand stilled on the fire poker. Eliza, ... You said you loved me too much to watch me struggle. You said I deserved better than a life of uncertainty and hardship. You said leaving was the most loving thing you could do. The words hung between them like a physical presence. Samuel set down the poker and looked at her directly. I meant every word. Then why are you here now? Why are you doing this? Samuel was quiet for a long time, searching for words that could bridge 20 years of silence. Because I was wrong, he said finally. I thought love meant protecting you from struggle. I thought it meant giving you up so you could have security and comfort. But I was young and proud and stupid. And now I'm older and hopefully a little wiser. I've spent 20 years building a successful business, making money, proving I could provide for someone. But none of it mattered, because the someone I wanted to provide for was already gone. Tears glistened in Eliza's eyes. Can't just come back after 20 years and expect everything to be the same. I know that. I'm not expecting anything, Eliza. I'm just trying to hold on to the last piece of my family's legacy and maybe find some kind of peace at the expense of everyone else's peace. Samuel stood and walked to the edge of the firelight, staring out. At the lights of the association houses scattered across the valley, your husband tried to steal my birthright. He spent 20 years building his empire on land that should have been mine, with the woman who should have been my wife. And now he wants to take the last thing I have left. So no, I'm not particularly concerned about his peace of mind. Eliza rose and came to stand beside him. Is that what this is really about? Is the land, or is it about me? Samuel turned to face her, and in the flickering firelight, she looked exactly as she had at 22, beautiful, strong, and just beyond his reach. It's about all of it, he said quietly. The land, the life I should have had, the choices I made. But mostly, it's about you. It's always been about you, Samuel. ... Her voice was barely a whisper. I know you're married. I know you have a life here, responsibilities. I'm not asking you to leave him or run away with me. I'm just asking you to understand why I can't walk away from this fight. She reached out and touched his face, her fingers tracing the lines that 20 years of hard living had carved around his eyes. You beautiful, stubborn fool. Don't you see what you're doing? You're not fighting for your birthright or your family's legacy. You're fighting because you're still in love with me, and you can't stand that I chose someone else. Samuel closed his eyes and leaned into her touch. Maybe you're right. Maybe this is all just the tantrum of a man who never learned to let go. It doesn't have to be, she said softly. You could still walk away. Sell the ranch to Robert, take the money, and start over somewhere else. Find someone who can love you the way you deserve to be loved. Samuel opened his eyes and looked at her. And what about you? Are you happy, Eliza? Really happy? The question hung in the air between them. Eliza's hand fell away from his face and she stepped back. That's not fair. I'm not trying to be fair. I'm trying to understand. When I left, I told myself you'd be better off with Henderson, that he could give you everything I couldn't. Did he? Are you the woman you wanted to become? Eliza wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking cold despite the warm evening air. Robert is a good man. He's provided for me, given me a comfortable life. We have a beautiful home, social position, everything a woman could want. That's not what I asked. She was quiet for so long that Samuel thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. Whoa, with everything I had, I loved you, but everything I had. When you left, I thought I would die from the pain of it, but I didn't die. Built a life. I learned to be content. Content, Samuel repeated, not happy. Content. Sometimes content is enough, is it? Because the woman I remember wasn't built for contentment. She was built for passion, for dreams, for a love that could move mountains. Elisa turned away from him, her shoulders shaking. That woman was young and foolish. She believed in fairy tales. Maybe she was right to. Maybe she was. But fairy tales don't pay for food or put roofs over heads or provide security when times get hard. You taught me that when you left. Accusation in her voice hit Samuel like a physical blow. He'd known his leaving had hurt her, but he'd convinced himself it was for the best. Now he saw the deeper damage he'd done. He'd killed her faith in dreams, possibilities, in the kind of love that could overcome any obstacle. Elisa, I need to go. She walked quickly to her horse and mounted. Please, Samuel, end this war, for both our sakes. She rode away into the darkness, leaving Samuel alone with his fire and his regrets. Chapter 4. The heart of the matter the next morning brought unwelcome visitors. Samuel was preparing breakfast over his camp stove when 6 men rode up to his toll station. He recognized most of them association members who'd been paying his toll with increasing reluctance. But today, they wore gun belts and grim expressions. Henderson rode at their head, his face set in hard lines. Hart, you've got one last chance to be reasonable. Samuel calmly poured coffee into a tin cup and took a sip. I'm listening. The association has voted to buy you out. We'll pay fair market value for your ranch, more than fair, actually, double what the land's worth. All you have to do is sign a release giving up any claim to the easement. And if I don't... Dr. Williams spoke up, his usual jovial manner replaced by cold hostility. Then we'll make you. Samuel set down his coffee cup and stood slowly. Gunbelt hung from a nearby tree branch, too far away to reach quickly. But years of dealing with rough freighters and claim jumpers had taught him that the best weapon was often the one between his ears. 6 against 1, he observed mildly. Seems like fair odds for a bunch of brave homeowners. Don't test us, Hart, Henderson growled. We're done playing games. So am I. Samuel's voice hardened. You want to know why I won't sell? It's not about the money. It's not even about the land. Not really. Then what is it about? Demanded the banker. Samuel looked directly at Henderson. It's about 20 years ago when a young man loved a woman so much he walked away to give her a better life. It's about watching that same woman marry someone else because he was too proud and too scared to fight for what mattered most. It's about living with regret every single day since then and finally having a chance to do something about it. Henderson's face went white with rage. You son of a bitch. This is about my wife. This is about the woman I should have married. If I'd had the courage to stay and fight for her, instead of running away like a coward... Henderson's hand moved to his gun, but Samuel continued talking, his voice calm and steady. You want to shoot me, Robert? Go ahead. But it won't change the fact that she never loved you the way she loved me. It won't change the fact that you got her by default, not by choice. And it won't change the fact that every time she looks at you, she's thinking about what might have been. You're lying. But Henderson's voice lacked conviction. Am I? Then why are you so afraid of me being here? If your wife truly loved you, if your marriage was built on something stronger than convenience and resignation, my presence wouldn't threaten you at all? Dr. Williams raised his rifle. That's enough talk. But before anyone could make a move, the sound of approaching hoofbeats made them all turn. Eliza rode hard down the road, her hair streaming behind her like a banner. She pulled up short when she saw the armed men surrounding Samuel. What is this? She demanded. Stay out of this, Eliza, Henderson said, without taking his eyes off Samuel. This is between men, like hell it is. Eliza dismounted and strode into the circle of armed men, positioning herself between Samuel and the rifles pointed at him. If you're going to shoot someone over me, you're going to have to shoot through. Me first. Eliza, don't. Samuel stepped toward her, but she held up a hand to stop him. No, Samuel. I've let other people make my choices for too long. She turned to face her husband, her green eyes blazing with an anger Samuel had never seen before. 20 years, Robert. 20 years I've been a dutiful wife, a perfect hostess, a credit to your social position. I've never complained, never asked for more than you were willing to give. But I won't let you murder a man in cold blood, just because you're afraid of losing something you never really had in the first place. Henderson lowered his gun, his face stricken. Eliza, ... Would you really think I didn't know? She continued. Did you think I was so stupid that I couldn't see the way you looked at me when Samuel's name came up in conversation? The way you made sure to buy up every piece of land around the Hart Ranch so he could never come home? The way you built that fence the moment you heard he might be returning? I was protecting our life together. You were protecting yourself. From the truth that I married you because I was hurt and scared and alone. From the truth that I've spent 20 years being grateful to you instead of loving you. From the truth that when I said Samuel's name in my sleep, it wasn't because I'd forgotten him, it was because I never could. The words fell like hammer blows in the morning stillness. Samuel felt his heart breaking for all three of them, for Henderson, who'd built his life on a foundation of sand, for Eliza, who'd sacrificed her dreams for security, and for himself, who'd been too much of a coward to fight for love when it mattered most. Henderson holstered his gun, his shoulders sagging in defeat. So what happens now? Eliza looked from her husband to Samuel, tears streaming down her face. I don't know, I honestly don't know. I do. Samuel stepped forward, his voice gentle but firm. Robert, I'll make you a deal, a real one this time. You deed me back legal access to my rancho proper road, not just the easement. In return, I'll sell you the ranch itself for exactly what you offered. But there's one condition. Henderson looked up warily. What condition? Samuel turned to Eliza, his heart in his eyes. The condition is that your wife gets to choose, to really choose, for the first time in 20 years. If she chooses to stay with you, I'll take the money and leave Clearwater Valley forever. You'll never see me again. And if she chooses you, then we'll leave together, and you can have everything, the ranch, the easement, all of it. Either way, your problem is solved.
Henderson
Looked back and forth between Samuel and Eliza, seeing the truth written in both their faces. Finally, he nodded slowly. And if she needs time to decide, then we all wait, Samuel said. No more threats, no more games. Just three people trying to find their way to something that looks like happiness. Chapter 5. The choice for 3 days. An uneasy peace settled over Clearwater Valley. Samuel continued to collect his tolls, but the hostility had gone out of it. Henderson's men no longer rode in armed groups, and the association members paid their fees with resignation rather than rage. It was as if the entire community was holding its breath, waiting for Eliza Henderson to decide the fate of them all. Samuel saw her every morning. She rode out to check on the community schoolhouse, where she volunteered as a teacher. She would nod politely as she passed through his toll station, but they didn't speak. The weight of 20 years and an impossible choice stood between them like a wall. On the 4th day, she didn't come. Samuel waited until noon, then closed his toll station and rode into town. He found her at the schoolhouse, sitting alone in the empty classroom with her head in her hands. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the tears on her cheeks. The children have all gone home, she said without looking up. Summer break. Samuel stood in the doorway, afraid to come closer. Eliza, ... double quotes. Do you know what the hardest part is? She asked, finally raising her head to look at him. It's not choosing between you and Robert. It's choosing between the woman I used to be and the woman I've become. Samuel stepped into the classroom, his boots echoing on the wooden floor. What do you mean? The woman I used to be believed in grand gestures and passionate love. She believed that true love could overcome anything: poverty, hardship, social disapproval. She would have followed you to the ends of the earth without a second thought. And the woman you've become? Eliza stood and walked to the window, looking out at the neat houses and manicured gardens of Clearwater Heights. The woman I've become knows the value of security, of respectability, of a life lived within the bounds of what's proper and expected. She knows that passion fades, but practical considerations endure. Samuel joined her at the window. Which woman is happier? Neither, she said with a bitter laugh. The woman I used to be was heartbroken and abandoned. The woman I've become is safe, but empty. There's no happiness in either choice, Samuel. There's only different kinds of regret. They stood in silence, watching the town go about its afternoon business. Finally, Samuel spoke. What if there was a third choice? What do you mean? Samuel turned to face her fully. What if you didn't have to choose between passion and security? What if you could have both? Eliza shook her head. That's not how life works. You taught me that when you left. Maybe I was wrong about more than just leaving. Maybe the choice was never supposed to be between love and security. Maybe it was supposed to be about finding someone who could offer both. And you think you can do that now? Samuel pulled a letter from his vest pocket. My lawyer in San Francisco has been managing my investments while I've been here. The freight business I sold was worth more than I let on. Eliza, a lot more. I'm not the penniless young man who left here 20 years ago. She took the letter with shaking hands, scanning the financial figures. Her eyes widened as she reached the bottom line. This can't be right. It is. I'm a wealthy man, Eliza. Wealthy. Enough to buy and sell Robert Henderson 10 times over? Wealthy enough to give you everything he has and more. But that's not why I'm showing you this. Then why? Samuel took the letter back and tucked it away, because I want you to know that if you choose me, it won't be because you're giving up security for love. It'll be because you're choosing the kind of love that can provide both. Eliza sank into one of the student desks, looking suddenly very young and very overwhelmed. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because I needed to know you could love the man I am now, not just the fortune I've accumulated. I needed to know that your choice was about us, not about money. And now, Samuel knelt beside her desk, taking her hands in his. Now I need you to know that you don't have to sacrifice anything to be with me. It's not comfort, not security, not social position. I can give you all of that and more. But most importantly, I can give you what Robert never could, the certainty that you're loved for exactly who you are, not for what you represent or what you can provide. Tears spilled down Eliza's cheeks. You make it sound so simple. Love is simple, Eliza. It's everything else that's complicated. But here's what I know. After 20 years of living without you, I'd rather have one day of real happiness with you than a lifetime of contentment without you. And if you'll have me, I promise to spend every remaining day of my life making sure you never regret choosing love over safety. Before she could respond, the schoolhouse door opened and Robert Henderson walked in. He looked older than his years, his face drawn with exhaustion and resignation. I thought I might find you here, he said to Eliza. Then to Samuel, I need to speak with my wife. Samuel started to rise.